Welcome to another edition of Chai with Molly, a show where we celebrate diversity the Canadian way. Once again, we want to welcome you all to a very special edition of Chai with Molly, talking to you about first-time buyers and much, much more. Stay with us. We're coming to you this week from New York. We are here in connection with the International Women's Celebration. Please join me in welcoming an extraordinary Canadian woman, Chantal Carpentier, to the show. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
All right. So you are here working with the United Nations. And what is the focus of International Women's Celebrations this year?
Well, this is the event. This week is the Committee on Status of Women. They have a meeting every year of 2 weeks. But what's special this year is because we just in September last year adopted, all our member states, all of our heads of states have decided to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes.
And one of them is on gender equality and women empowerment, which is very good. It's something we've been working at for a long time, since Beijing and before. And so that's the celebration this year.
All right, so talk to us a little bit about sustainable development. Big words,
yes,
buzzwords, but a lot of people don't quite understand and grasp the importance of it. So
right.
Why don't you help us understand what do you mean by sustainable development and why is it necessary, and then equate it to gender equality?
Right. Well, that's a very good question. And of course, at the UN, we have all these buzzwords and
yes.
people feel like we're in the bubble. So thank you for asking this question. Sustainable development is, we used to talk about development, and development was about countries that were less developed and maybe had more poverty, less involved in the trading and financing system. And so that was development. So the idea was, let's eradicate poverty, let's eliminate poverty. Then we also had a movement that wanted to reduce the environmental impact we're having on Mother Earth, right? So how do you reduce the loss of biodiversity, of our whales, of our bear, of our wolf, of our plants that we have and that we eat, and also of the pollution in our rivers, of our waters, of our oceans, and now, of course, everybody is aware of climate change. Mm-hmm. So a second pillar is the environment. So that was these two movements were moving in parallel. Okay. And then, of course, you can't alleviate poverty, or you can't take care of the environment if you don't have some sort of economic empowerment. And so that's the third pillar or dimension of this. So what sustainable development is about is to say, these three are interrelated and you need to address them together. You can't just focus on the economic, you can't just focus on the environment, and you can't just focus on the social or the development issues. You got to look at them in their entirety, mm-hmm. and your policies, the currents of your policy you put in place at the local level, at the national level, and at the global level must be coherent, so that by trying to achieve one goal, say development, you don't necessarily reduce or increase the impact you're having on the environment or on women. And therefore, the Sustainable Development Goals are all about, there's 17 of them, going from alleviating poverty, as we discussed, to women's empowerment, to secure access to food and nutritious food, to sustainable consumption production, to protecting our biodiversity and our climate and our oceans, all the way to a goal on how you're going to put all this together.
Exactly. So now how do we take these to the local level? Right? These are wonderful conferences that happen every year, and they happen in New York and all over the world. Now, how do we take these to the local level, right, and where they're implemented?
Yeah, and I would like to flip this question, Molly, if you don't mind, because really what happened here is the local level was brought to the global level. There's a lot of people, like everybody we saw here this week, have been doing this work for years. Some of them have been doing this for their entire life.
Yes.
And basically, it's a conglomeration of putting all this together and hard negotiations since 2012 before the Rio Plus 20 summit in Rio. And basically now it's saying, okay, we've been doing all these things at the local level. We also need the national level have been doing some things. And if you take Canada, for example, we have our own laws, and then we have our own laws at the state level, at the provincial level. In our cities, we have laws. They're not always coherent. And now we're saying, okay, and then we have communities also doing work. And then you say, okay, well, we've done all this. And how can we all work towards the same thing, the same goals, which are really leaving no one behind, no women, no Indigenous people, no youth, no marginalized people. And at the same time as taking care of our environment and making sure everybody has a decent life.
Right, and this sounds wonderful, and that is an ideal that no one will ever, question. But the reality is this: it is 2016. We still have 836 million people who still live in extreme poverty, and about 1 in 5 persons in developing regions live in less than $1.25 per day. It is still happening like that. So how are we going to be able to bridge this?
And it's a very good question, and it's very appropriate because I work at the UN Conference on Trade and Development, and that's kind of what we work on. So what we've been saying, these numbers are staggering, and yet they're much better than they used to be. So basically, we used to have level of poverties before India's progress and China's progress that were way above that. On food security and access to food, we used to have way more people going to bed hungry at night. Unfortunately, with the crisis that we have in 2007, 2008, we've lost some ground. And what we're trying to do here at the Conference on Trade and Development is basically to say, what are the enabling global environment that make it such that even if you at the local level or at the national level, you do all the right thing, but all of a sudden the economic system collapse or the financial system collapse, and now all the hard work you've been doing is you're going back on it. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that this enabling environment, this environmental system, this economic system, this financial system, this trade system is actually supporting and helping the communities work going in that direction. And so we've seen a lot of poverty alleviation. It doesn't justify to have anybody going hungry, especially disproportional population that are going to bed hungry or are living on these poverty lines are women, youth.
Yes.
It is unacceptable. However, in the past, before the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goal last September, we were reducing. We wanted to halve poverty. Now we're saying we're going to eradicate poverty. There's a huge difference because what we've been doing lately is to try to focus on achieving the easiest, the population that were easiest to be reached, so that we can reach the numbers. Now you can't do that. You actually have to go and dig and go to the rural communities, the poorest of the poor, and find solution for these people. Because you're not going to consider you've achieved these goals unless you've reached these people as well.
Right. Now, when you were speaking on the panel, I heard you say that governments from developing countries are coming to you for policies. What is it that they're seeking, and what is it that you at the United Nations are advising them on?
Yes, so we were created 50 years ago at the same time as the developing countries were decolonizing and joining this economic, financial, and trade system, developed by us for us, right? And so they basically wanted our help to make this system a bit more equal, a bit more favorable for them. And so what they ask us is basically, look at my trade policy. When I go and develop a trade agreement, say with Canada or with the US, is it going to actually benefit my population? Am I going to be increasing my chance of achieving each of these goals? Or if my priorities are these goals, am I heading in that direction? And more importantly, is it inclusive? Is it only going to be the richest that are going to get richer out of this? Or is it more going to be benefiting a vast portion of the population?
And is it the policies that you are advising them on? are they being able to implement? Let's talk about India. I've never been to China. I've been to many parts of India because there is still extreme poverty.
Definitely.
Extreme poverty. And then we have extremely rich people and very small middle class.
Yes.
So how are they going to be able to bridge this gap?
Well, India has done a lot of work lately, as you know, if you've been there. They've
Yes.
done some serious progress, and they're actually supporting their local communities to empowering them to do what they need to do. We also look at the investment policies that countries have. So it's really hard to develop without capital. It's really hard to develop without access to modern energy. So what we do is to help them then with these policies. So is this policy, this investment policy, going to bring enough foreign direct investment? But at the same time, not remove all the taxation power that I have, so I can continue to have enough money as a government to empower these communities and do these policy. And also that I don't sign an agreement, investment or trade, that basically limit my capacity as a government to put in place laws that would be favorable to women empowerment, to put in place laws that would allow for procurement from the youth or from the women businesses. We also work a lot on entrepreneurship. So we develop with local institution training material and training courses for entrepreneurship. But instead of just addressing just the business model, we address the idea, the business model, the ICT part, the access to capital part, the development part, the deploying part, the networking part. And so these are all ways that we help. And if you think about it, we all want immediate result. But if you look at Canada, we were extremely poor not so long ago. Yes. My family came about 5 generations ago, and the wind would come through the holes in the house, and people were freezing, and you would work really hard. And we want these countries to develop as soon as possible, alleviate poverty and hunger. At the same time, they are developing really quickly. It's a matter of how we can help enable them to develop even quicker so that their population can be living in decent.
All right, so I'm going to now change the conversation a little bit to Chantal.
Oh, okay.
So tell us about you. How did you get to be where you are? Obviously, you're a successful woman, living your dreams, making a difference. Mm-hmm. Tell us about your journey. How did you get here? And was it easy?
It's never easy, right? Thank you for the question. Basically, I come from the Gaspé area, from a very poor area, and my dad was kind of hunter-gatherer, really. So we had a little small farm and self-subsistence farm. And so I always loved agriculture. So when I went to college, I did science because I was gifted with science. And I went to McGill, and I did agricultural economics, which I love. McGill, being one of the top universities in the world, got a good education. We're very privileged in Canada that we have free education for all. So even somebody like me that come from a poor family can have access to education, which is not true for a lot of children around the world to this day. And that's one of the goals of the Sustainable Development Goal: access to good education for all, and not just elementary school, also high school and higher education. Then I always love agriculture, but I also love environment. And so I combined the two, and that was at the beginning, that was several years ago. And that was when McGill was one of the first few universities offering agricultural and environmental economics, which is a specialty where you actually look at the interaction between when you produce food, what's the impact on the environment, and vice versa. And then I had applied for a summer fellowship at Virginia Tech, and which I got. I thought it was impossible for me, little girl from Gaspé, to get there, and I said, there's no point in me applying. And my advisor was very good, insisted I should go. I should apply, and I applied, and I got the summer fellowship, and I loved it. And I went to do my PhD at Virginia Tech. And there I did more natural resource and environmental and agricultural economics. And when it came time to decide what I'm going to do when I grow up, I had offered from a tenure track position at university and going to the Amazon. And with IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institutes, which really work at eliminating the hunger in the world. And so I asked my advisor, was a woman, one of the youngest woman president of the American Agricultural Economics Association, youngest woman and one of the few women head of the Agricultural Economic Department in the South. We're talking 1992, 96,
Okay.
but still, it's still not that many women, as we would know. And she basically said, well, I have a full matrix of the pros and the cons, if I do this and if I do that. And so she was very patient, listened to me, and then when at the end she said, well, that's interesting. So what does your little voice tell you? And I was just a little bit like this in the panel this morning. I was like, my little voice, are you kidding me? I'm like so busy trying to wear it all out.
Yes.
And it took a few days to just calm down and just figure it out. And what I came up with was, well, what is the thing I'm going to regret not having done? And I was like, well, I'm young, I can go to the Amazon, and you know, I can always go back to a 10-year track. And then that put me into the international track. And then I came back to DC, working for a sustainable agriculture think tank. That was when we were introducing actually the organic standard in the US. So working, supporting my boss with all the legislation on the Hill about organic, and there was a lot of pushback, and they tried to put genetically modified organism as part of the organic, and there was a big brouhaha and organizing this and getting all the comments. It was very interesting. And then I went back to Montreal for the NAFTA, Commission for Environmental Cooperation. So there's a long story there, but I was the director of the Trade, Economic and Environmental Division, where we look at the environmental impact of trade in Canada, US, and Mexico, and then how can we make it positive? How can we green trade in North America? And so that was very interesting. And then I joined the UN.
Wow. So if there is someone who's watching, who's inspired by your story, who probably wants to do a little bit of what you're doing, and what would you like to say to them?
Follow your passion. Follow and work hard. None of this came easy. There's many times I wanted to give up, and there was, and have a good network of people that you love and love you and support you. Because there's many times you just want to give up. It's just too much, and you feel it's above you. It's not for me. it's too big for me. And it's not true. We all have it in us, and it's a matter of just persevering, working hard, and do something we love, because it's never work, right? It's always you love it. And have the right people around you, and people that are nocive and negative and always bring the negative, well, maybe you just don't need them in your life.
That's right. So there you go. So if you're one of those people who's inspired by Chantal's story, you know that you can also be successful. It doesn't matter what your path is, just make sure you follow your path and never give up, right? And be surrounded by the right people. That's really important. Thank you so much for talking to us, Chantal.
Thank you so much, Molly.